My name is Nathan, and the one person who genuinely believed in me was my grandfather. My parents found fault with nearly everything I did, but Grandpa Samuel always took the time to listen. He taught me how to fish, how to fix broken things, and how to stay silent when anger tempted me to react. More than anything, though, he taught me that greed tears families apart faster than hatred ever could. Before he passed away, he left me a piece of land near the lake outside our town, 3 acres filled with trees, a small wooden cabin, and countless memories from the summers of my childhood. When the will was read, my parents seemed supportive at first. They even smiled and said, "Your grandfather loved you very much." I believed them. That was my first mistake. A year later, I drove out to the lake property to spend the weekend there. The moment I arrived, I stopped cold. Chain-link fences surrounded the land. Bulldozers were pushing dirt across the property. Near the entrance stood a massive sign, "Future site of Silver Lake Luxury Resort." My stomach sank. I immediately called my father. "What's happening to Grandpa's land?" Silence. Then Dad let out a long sigh. "We were going to tell you eventually." "Tell me what?" "The land was sold last month," he said. "The developers made an excellent offer." I could barely breathe. They had sold my inheritance. His tone instantly turned defensive. "It was the practical choice. You weren't doing anything with the property anyway. That land wasn't yours. Or your parents'." Mom cut in from the background. "Everything we do is for the family." Family. That word only seemed to appear whenever they wanted something. I drove home trembling with anger. Not only because they had sold the land, but because they had taken the last connection I had to Grandpa. Or at least, that's what they thought. That night, I went through a box of belongings Grandpa had given me years before. Tucked inside one of his old fishing journals was a sealed envelope marked, "For Nathan, only if necessary." Inside was a notarized legal document. In an instant, everything changed. Years earlier, Grandpa had quietly transferred the land into a protected trust that would become entirely mine once I turned 25. My parents had never actually owned it, which meant only one thing. They had sold property that legally belonged to someone else. I sat staring at the document for several minutes without saying a word. Then, slowly, I smiled. Grandpa knew exactly who they were. The next morning, I contacted a property attorney. After reviewing the paperwork, she looked at me and said, "This changes everything." The resort developers had believed the sale was legitimate because my parents had forged documents during the transaction. Forgery. Fraud. The illegal sale of trust-protected property. The consequences were enormous. My lawyer immediately filed an emergency injunction to stop construction. Within 48 hours, work on the resort came to a complete halt. Suddenly, the people who had ignored my calls were in full panic mode. My parents arrived at my apartment furious. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "What did you do?" Calmly, I placed Grandpa's trust documents in front of him. The color drained from his face. His hand began to shake. "So you knew?" "Oh," I replied quietly. "I knew." After that, everything unraveled fast. The developers threatened lawsuits. Investigators uncovered forged signatures and false ownership claims. My parents insisted they had only been trying to help the family financially. At that point, nobody cared about excuses. For the first time in their lives, they were facing consequences too large to escape. One evening, Mom called me in tears. We could lose everything. I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I finally asked, "Did you think about losing me when you sold the last thing Grandpa ever gave me?" Silence. Heavy silence. Deep down, she already knew the answer. This had never been about helping the family. It was greed. Pure greed. And that greed finally destroyed the image they had spent years trying to protect. Months later, the court officially voided the fraudulent sale. The land was returned entirely to the trust. My parents avoided criminal charges only because the developers agreed to a massive settlement that nearly bankrupted them. As for me, I kept the property exactly the way I wanted it. No luxury resort. No hotels. No destruction. Instead, I restored the old cabin. Now it's summer again. I sit on the same porch where Grandpa once shared stories about family, integrity, and character. Whenever the wind moves through the trees, I remember something he told me long ago. Truth doesn't disappear just because you bury it beneath money. He was right. Because in the end, a single piece of paper exposed everything. My parents thought they had secretly sold my inheritance. But the final document Grandpa left behind destroyed their entire plan. The end.